I suspect, judging from the phone calls and emails that many of us have gotten today about this event, that it may be nearly as controversial as last night's Super Bowl halftime show, hoping that it will perhaps be just as revealing in a way as well. It is my great pleasure to be here tonight. Mr. Darl McBride joins us, President and CEO, I think as everybody here knows, thank you very much, of the SCO group. He comes with a number of colleagues as well. He is no stranger to big business and no stranger to the technology world. He is actually quite a learned man on things like the GPL, as we are going to hear shortly. I noticed in his slides he has references to former Professor Mr. Justice Breyer, so I look forward to seeing how he incorporates the Harvard Law School into his remarks as well. A couple of other quick notes, just by way of tone and format here tonight. There have been a number of conversations about this event and the format. I want to credit Mike and Jolt and others for bringing this event here tonight. Credit them also for what they're going to do shortly with Counterpoint. I suppose it comes as no surprise to anybody in this room that there is a lawsuit at stake here, a lawsuit with some very, very big stakes. And I want also just to state really quickly that it strikes me as this is a very important thing to have happen here tonight and with this crowd. I think that there are two important things that those of us who spend our time in the Academy do. One is to frame the hard questions, framing hard questions for ourselves and for the society around us. This is an issue, this open source, free Libre software issue versus, or in addition to other forms of software production, is a critically important topic and one where there are lots of different viewpoints. And I think it's wonderful that we're framing up the many hard problems that this has. And secondly is to seek the truth. I think that we will have a very interesting presentation shortly. I would urge in the question and answer session that follows for all of us to treat with respect this, treat with respect this microphone, but treat with respect this forum and this space. And there are a lot of brilliant minds I see in this room, not just from Harvard Law School in 02138, but some friends from 02139 as well, and so welcome. So I mean this as a two-part introduction, one of Mr. McBride, a distinguished businessman, and second of this community, broadly writ. And I urge us all to keep our minds open. With that, Mr. McBride.
Thanks, John. And just better put this on here. There we go. Is that on? Okay. John and Mike, I appreciate the invitation to come back and join you, as well as everyone who has joined us here today. It's tough to compete with nudity, and I didn't bring any here today, and you don't want me, so I bring that up as a little bit of an interesting point. There was an article written about this issue you're about ready to hear about today around SCO's intellectual property fight with the Linux community and, by extension, with IBM, or maybe it's the other way around. It was written in Forbes magazine earlier this summer, and it was posted out on Forbes.com. And the story was the most hit story in the history of Forbes.com, except for one. And that story was called The 10 Best Nude Beaches in America. So, once again, it's tough to compete with that. But I do look forward to meeting you here today. I would say that I'm very excited. I showed up at a time where we had a bunch of meetings tomorrow in Copley Square right around 12 o'clock. We scheduled this 2 weeks ago. And if anybody know what's going on in Copley Square tomorrow, anybody watch the game last night? Anybody Patriots fans here? Yeah, that was a great game, wasn't it? Boston man back here. Is that a Red Sox hat? Okay. I went into the game as not a Patriots fan and exited the game as a Patriots fan. That was just an outstanding game. Kudos to your team. That was a great game. We have a little bit of a Super Bowl ourselves going on here in the computer world right now, and I would argue it's around the sort of defining the future of how digital rights are going to play out in the software world. The players on the field here are the SCO group, which after a series of acquisitions over a number of years owns this thing called the Unix operating system. So we're the owners of this source code and copyrights around Unix. And the other player on the field is International Business Machines, who is also stepping up as a leader for basically the Linux environment. If you read USA Today, you would see, as you saw in the game last night, you've seen a lot of people around the world have been seeing IBM running a lot of ads around Linux. If you open USA Today on the second page, you'll see IBM intricately tied to this thing called Linux. How many of you in here have even heard of this thing called Linux before? Raise your hands. Virtually everybody. Okay. So I appreciate the fact that we're coming into a well-educated audience on this issue. So those are the players on the field. What's at issue here? If SCO wins versus IBM wins. I think that it's going to reshape the future of software one way or another. That's my view on it. So with that said, why don't we just dive in here. This is a few stats on our company, what we're about. You know, as you put the two combatants on the field, clearly you see this is a David-Goliath type of thing when you see our revenue versus IBM's. We measured out in market capitalization one time. If the size of us was measured against IBM in market cap, IBM would be the 10,000-pound man if we were 200 pounds. So clearly, obviously, they're much more powerful and much bigger than us. The topics that I'd like to go through for discussion this evening are as follows. The importance of intellectual property, go through a little bit there. I want to talk about SCO's ownership position around this thing called Unix. It looks like we have a few people here that are fairly expert in that. And give you my view on that. We want to talk about what we're doing to defend our intellectual property rights. And then with some of the things going on as we speak, you know, the sideshow in the Super Bowl yesterday was the halftime show. The sideshow in the IBM SCO battle are things that have happened in the last week with the MyDoom virus. The largest virus supposedly in the history of the computing industry launched the largest attack, DOS attack, on a company website, which was our website yesterday. So that's a little bit of the sideshow going on, but it is going to have an impact, I think, in terms of how things are playing out in this digital age. And finally, what does the future hold? So starting off, let me back up for just a minute. I, as a precursor to this, sat in a room a little larger than this about a year ago out on a campus at Brigham Young University, and the CEO of a leading open source company came out there and spoke, and I was kind of interested to go hear what he was talking about. So this is a competitor of ours, and I was actually kind of interested in going and breaking bread with him and talking about, you know, how can we move the ball down the field together and how can we work together. And as I went to hear his speech, I was sitting up there amidst a bunch of students. I didn't look like a student, which I wasn't. Therefore, it made sense I didn't look like one. But as he spoke, there were a couple of things that were striking to me. The first thing that was striking is he got up and started talking about how the copyright system in America was outdated, that the copyright laws have been on the books for hundreds of years, and they were totally out of sync with what was going on in the digital age. And he was calling on students to write your congressperson, lobby Congress to sort of overturn the current copyright laws. We need to get these copyright laws out. This DMCA, Digital Millennium Copyright Act, you're all familiar with that, I'm sure, is a disaster. We've got to get it out. And it was interesting for me as the CEO of a company who has very important copyrights to hear the attack was not on us directly. It was, we got to get rid of copyrights because that plays into what we're trying to do with our open source system. So that was interesting to me. The second thing that was interesting is he said, one of the questions that came up along the way was, who do you compete with? What are you selling in the marketplace? So he's selling this thing called Linux. He said, well, what we do is we have this operating system, and it's free, okay? And we go into corporate environments, and we go out, and we're basically, essentially what he said is we're trying to displace a company called SCO and Sun. And I was like, SCO? That's me. You know, so I took that real personally. And we didn't break any bread that day. And about a month or two after that, after some things happened between us and IBM, we launched into what became a $3 billion lawsuit with the SCO group against IBM, filed on March 6th of last year.